panels, in the status quo, Taiwan received more oppressions and pressures from China because Taiwan is developing the relationship with America, and we believe that under China government, we as Taiwan is limited to develop our international relationships. Our goal is very clear. We want Taiwan to be acknowledged as a sovereign state due to the fact that we already have our own constitutions. We already democratically elected we have already democratically elected leaders, and we have 300,000 active troops in our armed forces, and also we already have our stable income, and that's why we believe that we are justifiable to do separatism. But we as the government side of the house, we don't think that it is our burden of proof to prove to you that whether separation is bad or not. But in here we are going to prove to you why it is how it is impactful if we emulate the demands and demonstrations of the Hong Kong independence group. Yeah. So why we want this? Because we want let me explain why we want this. Because we want China to take our demand seriously, ladies and gentlemen. By emulating the demands and the way of protest, just like what Hong Kong group does, we believe that it is the only way to get China government's attentions by constantly protesting and also Hong Kong protesters is really vocal to advocate their complete separations by putting million people on the streets to the protest and do riots and etc. So by doing this, we believe that it is going to we're going to get China's attentions even towards attention, ladies and gentlemen. And why it is important to get those attentions? Because we believe that the more people condemn China, for example, the more people condemn China, we believe that it is more. We are going to be we are going to get our demands quickly than ever, ladies and gentlemen. So moving on, why we believe that it how I'm going to prove how impactful if we emulate the demands and demonstrations of the Hong Kong independence group. First of all, let me explain what is really the demand. The demand is the implementations of complete universal suffrage, ladies and gentlemen. And also we want separatism. Why we want this? Because we don't want any more oppressions coming from China. We want to be no more. Because we believe that why it is feasible, because we already have the different principle with China. Taiwan really value the principle of democratic principle, which we believe that it is why it is justifiable to separate from China. And also why it is how impactful it is if we emulate the demonstrations just like what Hong Kong independence group does, because we as in the status quo we already see how Hong Kong protesters really get the China's intentions by doing riots in the streets, and also include millions of people on the streets to demand, which we believe that that is the only way for Taiwan to get the demands from China's government, ladies and gentlemen. Thus we believe, thus we have proven to you why it is how is it impactful, and why to begin with China and Taiwan have different principle. So Taiwan is not unjustifiable for Taiwan to stay under the China.
One have to emulate these kinds of demands to their own state, because the spectrum between China and between Taiwan and Hong Kong is already different to begin with. Understand, right? The different situation between Hong Kong and Taiwan is that Hong Kong, there is no such a big they are having such a big problem in terms of their political condition. In contrast to Taiwan, there is no such a big problem in their political demands. But let's talk about how their economical benefit that these kinds kinds of Taiwan is really harmful when we are using these kinds of policy at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because understand Taiwan still also we also concede that Taiwan also there are some people that demand for dependency with China, but we don't think that using this kinds of way is that a very legitimate for Taiwan at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because the progress that Taiwan face right now would be harm in the government side of the house. So our stance, we don't want to emulate the demands of demonstrations, the demands and demonstrations, because we want to keep the progress that we already achieved under status quo, ladies and gentlemen. Example like on how democratic maturity that already exists in Taiwan, that we want to protect those kinds of progress at the end of the day. And also, we want to protect the economic development that already exists inside Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen, because in their side it would be harm and on how China's reactions would be most likely worse in their side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. So two arguments in my speech. First is that why there is a significant difference between Taiwan and Hong Kong, and secondly, as Taiwan, why we have to stay under status quo and accept China's government in form of their treatment to Taiwan. So and rebuttals would be integrated in my argument. So first argument, why there is a significant difference between Taiwan and Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, there are basically two points that why this is a very, very different case, right? First is that the cause of the problem, and secondly the difference between the society interests. First is that the cause of problem. Ladies and gentlemen, understand what triggers Hong Kong that doing these kinds of demonstration, ladies and gentlemen. Hong Kong demand for independence because they also reject the extradition bill that coming by China's government mainland, ladies and gentlemen. Status quo, these kinds of extraditions is really problematic because it's really problematic to Hong Kong citizens, ladies and gentlemen. And understand these kinds of policy or these kinds of prohibition is not happen to Taiwan, ladies and gentlemen. So what is China's mainland didn't put any particular law to Taiwan itself. So understand there is a different spectrum of environment on how they are demand for the independent state, ladies and gentlemen. This trigger is not only exclusive to Hong Kong, ladies and gentlemen, but understand the parliament in Hong Kong, for example, are not fully democratized their own system, ladies and gentlemen. The politicians has most likely come by the China's mainland, ladies and gentlemen. It's different with Taiwan. There are most of their government has already democratized their own values inside their own state, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that there is no significant problem in terms of political condition at the end of the day. So understand, Hong Kong government side need to prove then why it's really urgent to make Taiwan emulate these kinds of policy in their side of the house, because because we see that the problem on their political condition is not that big at all, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, the difference on society interests. Understand that we have to concede that there are several people that demand for independency, that like Chesa told you before, right? But moreover, there are also most of people that still wanted to stay in China, ladies and gentlemen. That is we say that there is a very, very much benefit that these kinds of Taiwan's people to stay under China's mainland, that I will explain more in my second argument. But even if there are several people that have grievances to leave China because China's government is evil or communist is bad and so on and so forth, we understand it cannot be the parameter on how you have to join these kinds of way, ladies and gentlemen, because at the end it could create more reaction towards to China's mainland, that I will explain more in my second argument. But also these kinds of demonstration couldn't be the parameter, because we have to understand most of people still want to stay under China's government, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we have to understand how utilitarian analysis is really important, that we cannot sacrifice these kinds of people that still wanted to join under the China's mainland government, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that there is a significant difference between how Hong Kong and Taiwan face right now, ladies and gentlemen. And second argument, as Taiwan, why we have to stay under status quo and accept China's government in form of their treatment. So we have to also see how the political condition in Taiwan, right? Understand there is no such a big problem in Taiwan. Taiwan as a special region is in China still have their own access to elect their own representative. They are having their own independency on how to choose their own policy. They are even still questioning the traditional dualistic political position on the two main parties, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the discussion in the parliament still happen, and we see that there is not a big problem in Taiwan. And rejection also about the predominance of Chinese fear is also exists in Taiwan, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that the discussion is still exists. But also, China give the special treatment to these kinds of state, ladies and gentlemen. Their own political process. That's why there is no such a big problem at the end of the day. But secondly, it's even harm in their side of the house, because it harm the progress that we already achieved in the status quo. There is no such a big problem, because in status quo, China still give wide opportunity and good treatment to Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen. Example like economic benefit. The economic benefit in Taiwan is really contribute towards to the China's mainland, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that it's really have a big impact on how they are still have benefit one another, ladies and gentlemen. So most likely China's mainland would give their own good treatment at the end of the day, and they would not attack Taiwan just like what happened in Hong Kong, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we say that scrutiny is still exists, because society actually understand that the political condition of these kinds of China's mainland should be scrutinized by their own citizens, ladies and gentlemen. In comparative, it's harmful in their side of the house, because using their proposal would hamper the progress that even exists under status quo, ladies and gentlemen. But also understand that Taiwan is still economically dependent with China's mainland, ladies and gentlemen. Understand that Taiwan is really dependent to China's economic development. Using this proposal would harm the stability inside the Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen. All the progress in terms of economic development that they already achieved in the status quo would be even worse in their side of the house. But also, it's harm even more by emulate the demands, because understand the characteristic of China mainland government, ladies and gentlemen. They are able, for example, China would put embargo, for example, to Taiwan, close the system from Taiwan to another sectors, ladies and gentlemen. We say that it's really harmful, because it can affect to the society as a whole, ladies and gentlemen, and create more casualties in the side of the house, and especially on how these kinds of proposal would create in productivity in terms of how society exercise their own activity inside their own state, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we say that attention that exists in the status quo is not the big parameter, and why we have to apply these kinds of proposal. That is why we are really proud to oppose them.
Mr. and Madam Chair, understand that the burden of proof in the government side of the house is not to prove to the extent where Taiwan can be independent or Taiwan can be totally free from the China itself, ladies and gentlemen. But our burden of proof is that to show you whether it is justified for us to do the same type of demonstrations as what Hong Kong did, ladies and gentlemen, and how it will benefit Taiwan at the very first place. But let's see how opposition side of the house argument, right? They try to bring an argument saying that there is no significant reason for Taiwan to demonstrate, because inherently Taiwan is fine in current status quo, and there's no significant reason for us to do these demonstrations. We said that opposition side of the house really being dismissive to the current problems that faced by Taiwan, right? Taiwan in current status quo is very, very limited by the power of China itself, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that they have different ideology, the fact that Taiwan having a democratic ideology is different with Tiongkok itself. It creates an internal problems in the Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen. How these limitations look like? Number one, it limits our international relations. We say that people. There's still a trend in the world where people are still believing in one China's policy, right? People still believe that every land in China is one, ladies and gentlemen, and they don't give us more recognitions. They don't give us, the Taiwan itself, a recognition that they are an independent country, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, it limits our international relations in terms of how we gain an investment economically, because there's only a few countries that recognize us as an independent country, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, therefore, it is really hard to do for us to develop our economy more efficiently because simply there's our international relations is being limited by the fact that that people still see us as a part of China, and people still go to invest to China itself, ladies and gentlemen. Also, ladies and gentlemen, it's also limited by China's tendency to be violent, right? People see China as, for example, how China with his communist ideology are intervening the South China Sea and etc. People see China as a violent, therefore it's hard for us to engage to this system, ladies and gentlemen, because China is simply seen as the bad actor in current status quo, and people don't give us that much of recognitions. Let's see the second problems. Let's see how China, with its communist ideology, are treating the media freedom in the Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because we see that our status as a democratic country, we need our media to be free, right? We want our media to be more progressive, ladies and gentlemen. But let's see how China's treating us. Reasons why they are doing so is that because we are still very independent to China. China have a big justifications to oppress us because we simply are still being independent economically to China, right? And that is the reason why they are easily to try to treating our media and try to harm our democracy, ladies and gentlemen. By our proposals, we think that we will gain more independency and to not being too dependent to China, and there's no validation for China to do that operations and treating our media freedom at the very first place. Also, they say that in current status quo it's okay because scrutinizations still exist. Let's see, ladies and gentlemen, these scrutinizations is not exist in the context of Communist Party, right? People didn't value the demands of the society because they simply value the Communist Party more, ladies and gentlemen. They are really anti-democratic and try to see us as their historic enemy, ladies and gentlemen, because simply we have different history with China itself, ladies and gentlemen. In my speech, I will deliver to you why it is justifiable for us to do these demonstrations, how Hong Kong and Taiwan have a similar background, ladies and gentlemen, and second, I will analyze the best and worst case scenario or on what the very least that we can get if we do these demonstrations. Number one, how it is justified, ladies and gentlemen. Understand that Taiwan is also have the same conditions with Hong Kong, right? They both colonized by European countries. The fact that Taiwan is also being colonized by Dutch, ladies and gentlemen. The fact it causes them to have different ideology to become a democratic country, ladies and gentlemen. These historical reasons and also is also affected by the fact that in the past we are the one that governed China in the very first place, but then the Communist Party try to do the dispute, and we are being out of the China's mainland and become to those small islands that right now we call as Taiwan itself, ladies and gentlemen. This is the same. We say, ladies and gentlemen, this same background caused us to have different ideology with China. The fact that we have a democratic ideology, right? This is how China's trying to. This is because China is also have that negative sentiment towards us, saying that we are having an historical problems, and the fact that we have different ideology by democratic ideology, giving them more incentive to be more oppressed to us and try to limit us in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. And also, ladies and gentlemen, there's already an international support. We say that there's already international support for that recognize Taiwan in current status quo, right? But it is still being very, very limited, ladies and gentlemen, because there is a tendency of people trying to believe in one China's policy, and it limits our investment channel, ladies and gentlemen, because we cannot really open for many investment because people don't simply recognize us as an independent country. By doing this thing, ladies and gentlemen, at least we can gain the particular recognitions and by the international society that we are somehow different with China, and therefore we can gain more independence, ladies and gentlemen, and we can gain more channel of investment by the international community, ladies and gentlemen. My second argument, my best and worst case scenario analysis. If we do these particular demonstrations and follow how Hong Kong do it, ladies and gentlemen, we might not going to say that we are going to independent completely, right? But at the very least, we can establish our own constitutions freely without the interventions of China, ladies and gentlemen. At the very least, we can gain recognition from international society and saying that we are an independent entities, and therefore they can morally invest to us, and we can develop our economy and not being too controlled and limited by the fact that China is trying to limit us at the current status quo, right? Also, ladies and gentlemen, we say that in our very best case scenario, we say that we will gain, in the situations where we can gain independence more completely, it's even better, right? Because we are now can be independent economically, and we say that even if we are being independent, we say that it's not going cause us an economic downfall. Why? Because there's already an international demands to support us in terms of how USA, for example, try to approve us and trying to invest to us, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, because of this, we say that because of this, we going to gain more recognitions, and people will start to recognize us as an independent country and going to invest to us in the very first place. Opposition side of the house have to prove us why suddenly we didn't have the same justifications to do these demonstrations to China, ladies and gentlemen, and why the Taiwan's current status quo can be organically changed, ladies and gentlemen, without these particular recognitions in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we are proud to propose these motions.
Panel's first response. If the government claims their BOP is to judge whether or not it is justified for Taiwan to do so, thus they are automatically lose the debate, because it is the matter of Taiwan to do it, it is the right of Taiwan to do it. Yes, there is justified for Taiwan to do it, because it is the full autonomy of Taiwan to do it. The question in this debate is whether or not the move to questions Chinese authority is strategic or not if it comes to riot. Thus, this is the exact stance that we are trying to prove. It is, if we are implementing the riots as same what as the Hong Kong did, it is not strategic for us, because first, it is not successful. Second, it will create more harm towards Taiwan. Thus, the existence of Taiwan throughout these times, it is very important to be sustained. Thus, it will be harmful if we are engaged in the same way that Hong Kong did. Neny already explained to you the different inherent characteristic between Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I will extend to it what is China's response to it and why it is harmful towards their particular states. But second of all, their claim that international relation will also be harmful if you are not going to implement this particular cases, yada yada yada. Our cases is saying that in status quo, international relation that cited to Taiwan cases is also inherently good. The fact that even if US is not claiming the Taiwan as their partner, but in the fact that Donald Trump consistently giving the arms or doing a business trade towards the Taiwan, it shows to you that those particular relations between Taiwan and US is still good. The most important thing in here is about the access of US giving those goods towards Taiwan. The problem in their side of the house, if they are implement those particular proposal, it would create a tension between China and Taiwan, and China is highly possible to close the access for Taiwan to doing a business trade and doing a partnership with US. It is a very harmful case, because if their goal is going to achieving independence, they cannot achieve independence, because in order for them to achieve that, you need investment, and investment only happens from the liberal country such as US, which is already blocked if you are doing this particular riot, because China's tension is already increased, and you cannot do anything if the investment has already been cut. Three arguments that I will prove in this particular debate. First, about the feasibility of the implementation of the demonstration. Why is it not possible? Second of all, why mainland attention, responding to Chesa's case, would bring bad impacts towards Taiwan. And third of all, the future life upon Taiwan, especially to the process of election in late of January 2020. First of all, the feasibility of the implementation of the demonstration. Why is it not possible? They claim that many protesters want to fight for their country because in the sense of their intention for them to move out and free towards the Chinese mainland. Neny has already told to you that no, it is not going to happen because it will creating a polarization in society. Thus, because this polarization exists, the possibility of separatism exists and also happening in their side of the house, because there are several people that considered living in mainland means its stability for its life and they can be survive. But I will add to this. Moreover, the reason why they cannot do a particular riot as easy as that, because their characteristics of Taiwanese people is they are nationalists. What nationalists want to achieve in the very first place is the stability, is the safetyness, and all the things that they want to do to make sure that the sustainability of the country exists. The fact that Taiwan has not been conquered by the China since 1980, it shows to you that they are successfully to be survived. Being nationalist, it is make sure to you that you are not doing a reckless means. It's as an act to destroy your country, and doing this riot will destroy your country. But even if they have the willingness to do it, less likely and most likely they will fail the riot. Why? Because they have less human resource, because the most of the people inside of Taiwan is refugee, is the political criminal that runs from the Chinese, for example. They have less incentive for them to doing a riot and fight, because before they move into Taiwan, they are being hunted down by the Chinese government. Thus, they should explain to us why such motivation exists when it comes to going riot towards China, and make sure that the Chinese want to directly hear the demand without necessarily explain the possibility of it. The first feasibility stands for us. But the second of all, why the mainland attention would bring bad impacts towards Taiwan? Chesa said they want to make China accept the differences between the country simply by doing riot. No feasibility. But we say the reason why the China would give such harm is that because this, then what sector will be harmed? First, we say that sovereignty of the China will be of Taiwan will be harmed. Notice that the Taiwan has this characteristic that they are immune to any extradition bills that makes Taiwan become safe haven places, especially to the political criminal from China and the people who have very liberal ideology like supporting LGBT and etc. China would respond to this badly if the demonstration comes or occurs, because it would see they would see Taiwan as a traitor. Why this is happening? Because for all the respect that China gives for Taiwan for them to freely exercise their ideology and their economic models, thus China would China will do two things. First, they will arrest all political criminals that runs to the Taiwan, because they want to seek a revenge on retaliation for them, for example, like that. Then second of all, people in Taiwan with different ideologies, such as having LGBT stances, for example, going to be arrested, because the Chinese mainland simply think that those particular ideology and notions simply as the bad things to do, and you cannot condone that. But third of all, I will engage to the future life upon Taiwan, especially after doing election, in the process of election. Here's the thing. We should concede that the Taiwan goal is going to be, they want to be a liberalized community. They want also to be economically capitalistic. Tsai Ing-wen, currently the only liberal candidate in the nearly election in January 2020. Seeing that the characteristic of them is make Tsai Ing-wen forcing the Taiwanese people to riot, means they are going to make the people of Taiwan is not sided or leaning also towards Tsai Ing-wen. Why this is so? Because notice the characteristics of two things. The characteristics of the people is they're the people who firstly is a swing voter. They also tend to believe that they are siding to the Chinese mainland because it is stable for their life. Thus, if they are forcing those people to riot, it can be danger for their life, and they consider that maybe doing a riot is not a good thing to do. Thus, I would not choose this person. I would choose maybe a person who might be communist, but it will save for my life, rather than I would go to riot. Then it is increase the possibility of me to dying, for example. But the second characteristic is that why people would possibly hear this particular narrative, because in parliament there are also a large number of constituents that is also sided to the CCP, for example, to the Chinese mainland. Why this is a very important analysis? Because it enough to show to you that the influence of Tsai Ing-wen to directly push people to particular riot is easily to be shifted and swayed and say to the particular Taiwan people that Tsai Ing-wen is trying to kill you, for example. Tsai Ing-wen is going to give you bad influences to your life. Thus, the ideal goal of being liberalized and economic capitalistic cannot happen in their side, because it directly shuts down all the progressivity that China may have by a simple riot that maybe Chinese would happen. Comparatively, in our side, all those feasibility, all those responses of mainland, and the third of all the chances after the election will be slightly illiberal and increase in our side. Thus, our stability still exists. We cannot do it now, and now is not the right time. Thank you.
Finals, if opposition wants to defend that Hong Kong is not similar to Taiwan, then they must be willing to defend they must be willing to defend if Hong Kong is the same with China. If Taiwan is the same with China, they must be willing to defend whether or not China upholds the democratic value that Taiwan upholds, because all of their argument is being dismissive to our case when we say that human autonomy and free will is important when it comes to it's important when it comes to democracy. All of their cases is contingent upon their best case scenario that they will still have feasibility, they will still have stability within their governance, they will still have stability in economic, but they never engage to our side of the house when we say that all of those economic policies, all of those policies that exist in Taiwan is contingent upon the communist value, is contingent upon CPC's consent, ladies and gentlemen, in which if in Taiwan people are that nationalistic, then they must be willing to defend the nationalistic value at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the opposition side house is being dismissive towards. So in my speech, I have two major points in which is it urgent to emulate the demands, and secondly I will compare my worst case scenario. They say that it's not urgent because there's no such problem politically speaking. Panels, yes, in this of the house, they might have no problem in politics, but understand if there's no universal suffrage, meaning that you won't have stability within Taiwan's governance permanently, you will still have to succumb to CPC's ideology. You will still have to succumb to the communist value, meaning that in opposition side of the house, they will not have stability to exercise their free will, in which free will and human autonomy is important. Just because you have stability right now, doesn't mean that the CPC will not going to stop to exercise the authoritarian governance. Doesn't mean that you're going to have free will. Doesn't mean you have full power to determine your own policy, listener. Because in comparative, all of their policy, whether if it's politics or economy, the one that's going to determine if it's necessary or not is CPC, in which their cost and benefit analysis is contingent upon to China's consent, right? They don't really put Taiwan's consent into considerations in creating policy. So in the house, stability will still not be exist anyway, listener. Even if it exists, it exists holistically because it's not contingent upon to the democracy value that we demand, ladies and gentlemen, that we demand actualization because we want to separate, because we have our own constituents, man. We have our own constitution. We want to establish our own democratic policy, man. We want to establish that people have the opportunities to speak up, ladies and gentlemen. In their side house, if they say that China mainland government is evil to begin with, then they must be willing to explain why if they not speak up, why they will have stability if China is that evil, why China will not be that authoritarian if China is that evil. All of these cases is not answered by opposition side of the house, because there are many talks about their best case scenario, ladies and gentlemen. In comparison to our side of the house, we said it's urgent because Taiwan deserves the universal suffrage. Just because you have a stable policy doesn't mean that you don't need universal suffrage, in which it's important for states to have universal suffrage, because if you have universal suffrage, meaning that you're going to have the full power, meaning that you're going to have the full authority to decide policies, man. Because in outside the house, we're going to make sure we're going to adjust the policies by the democratic value, in which is it really what's best for people? Is it really what's best for is it really best for Taiwan people, ladies and gentlemen? By establishing our independence group, we will going to have a platform to speak up. We're going to be perceived as someone that have legitimate entity. We're going to be seen as someone who fights back, someone who retaliates. We're going to show the people that we demand independence, and we deserve to be independent. In their side of the house, if they chose to not speak up, ladies and gentlemen, China will have no incentive to do good to Taiwan, because they see that Taiwan is succumb to their governance, ladies and gentlemen, in which it's not strategic, ladies and gentlemen. And also, in status quo also, we currently facing the rise of a certain groups that demands for separatism also, ladies and gentlemen. For example, you have OPM, GAM, Umbrella Movement, Arab Spring, Pink Tide. So it's safe to assume that we already have a safety net to begin with, because all of this movement is something that us Taiwanese have in common with, to exempt ourselves from authoritarian regime, to exempt ourselves from oppression. So it's urgent for us to establish independence group, because it's already a trend to begin with. It already has its own attention. Internal community already pay attention to this kind of things, gentlemen. So it's safe to assume that we already have a safety net to begin with. Opposition side of the house say that Hong Kong and Taiwan have different values. Just because we emulate the demand doesn't mean that we're going to succumb to Hong Kong's values, man. What we want to emulate in Hong Kong's independence group, we want to emulate the demands of universal suffrage, man. We want to emulate the demands of full power, we want to emulate the demands of independence, ladies and gentlemen. So they cannot blatantly just say that we're going to be just like Hong Kong, ladies and gentlemen. Also, pay attention in the status quo. Lots of democratic countries like Indonesia, USA, to begin with, already dubious to China, listener. So it's safe to assume that we already have a safety net to begin with. We already have a safety net to begin with. It's important for us to take the advantage of the status quo, ladies and because independency, because democratic value is something that's very familiar to lots of people, even in international society. Separatism, democratic value is something that people have a sense of belonging toward. So it's safe to assume that we have a safety net. In their side of the house, they say that scrutiny, it's not urgent to emulate because scrutiny will exist. Panels, scrutiny in their side of the house will not exist because scrutiny is contingent upon the question whether or not it's feasible to scrutinize authoritarian regimes. So in their side of the house there will be no scrutiny at all, because there will be no evaluation and check and balance to the government, to authoritarian governance. And lastly, compare worst case scenario. Even if in their side of the house, yes, China might retaliate, to the very least we have moral value, man. To the very least we fight back. To the very least we say no to succumb into CPC's governance, ladies man. Because in comparison, what opposition has proved to you is that they only prove the best case scenario, but they never engage to our worst case. They never engage to their worst case scenario. What if China will still be authoritative, ladies man? What if China will still oppress the Taiwan, ladies man? In our side of the house, we already proved to you why it's urgent, man. We already proved you the details in status quo that separatism is something that's already a trend, ladies man. Separatism is feasible because you have humanitarian in international societies, man. You have SJWs that will fight for you, ladies man. So it's safe to say that we're going to still have the attention as to speak up, ladies man. So vote for government side house.
Tuh, 2, 3. what opposition told you in today's debate, right? We told you that Taiwan current status quo is that progressive, and current status quo of Taiwan is where China is very friendly for Taiwan, for letting them to be the only country who is speaking Chinese language and can choose their own political leader. And we told you that they are the only Asian country who legalized LGBT society, which is not being condemning by China too. It shows you that the current status quo of China isn't that emergency as what happening in Hong Kong status quo, where they would like to oppose the extradition bill that already told you by Neny, ladies and gentlemen. So we told you that if you do this as Taiwan, this is not something that is good to you. Even if you have the independency, we told you that you cannot do that. It cannot be separated with China. And lastly, why it is not strategic in the years of election, and why we should keep Tsai Ing-wen in the hold of position in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So here's my contention, right? First, on independency. Their main argumentation on this, saying that first, they have different background and historically injustice event, and second, there's a recognition and benefit that they will get in the end of the day. So first of all, we say that yes, that the people who have the grievances and who are being unjustified in the last time have the right to do this kinds of thing. But Neny already told you that the grievances that happenings between these individuals do not outweigh the marginal benefit of the citizens that they are having right now, where they can elect their own politician, where the democracy is running, and where the economic benefit is given by the Chinese government in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So we told you there is more utility that we should maintain and hold in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, upon only comparing towards the grievances of these individuals that is not even characterized clearly by the government side of the house. But second of all, ladies and gentlemen, we think that even if people have the grievances and they would like to change and they would like to be independent, we say that not all people inside of Taiwan would like to do that in the end of the day, right, ladies and gentlemen? We told you that inside of the political sphere in Taiwan, there's a Taiwan's politician and society who would like the independence, and the one who also still pro-Beijing in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So we don't think that unification happened inside of that sphere, right? So even if these people who are not pro-Beijing or pro-Beijing have their own voters, we told you that citizens aren't all having the perception that you should do this independence in the end of the day, or even they are confused what stance they should take. For example, there are people who like democracy but want economic benefit in the end of the day, which can only be given by China's contribution and economic operation inside of Taiwan in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that even upon the individuals inside of Taiwan itself, there is still a confusion upon whether or not you should get the independence in the end of the day or not, ladies and gentlemen. But second of all, even if they get the independence, right, we told you that why they cannot do it in my second layer, but second contention upon the recognition and the benefit that they told you will appear inside of their house. Government can only win this argumentation if status quo is that bad that people are having severe inability of buying basic needs and etc., or cannot operate the democracy inside of Taiwan country itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because the comparative in our side of the house is that China's increasement of aggression, because they don't like Taiwan to be like that in Neny's argumentation already, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that this comparative should be judged clearly, right? So what is exactly the likelihood of China doing this? We told you that first, China's president's action to people that against their government, that against communism, ladies and gentlemen, that the case of Uyghur, for example, they can be that violent in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. We told you that this also will happen inside of Taiwan if Taiwan against the government. But second, the fact that the powerful political party is CCP and communists, Iksan said that they occupied the Taiwan's land back then. This is highly also can be done right now. If, for example, Taiwan declaring that they would like to oppose the Chinese government in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because they would like to still be in Taiwan and they would like to still getting the natural resources and economic benefit inside of Taiwan in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, they will be that violent because they want economic hegemony and economic benefit in the end of the day. But third of all, they do a mere occupation in Africa through loans, and that exactly, ladies and gentlemen, exactly the current status quo shows you how capable of China is to do violent and for occupying things that they would like to have inside of status quo, ladies and gentlemen. The increasing of China's hegemony and also over would most likely push China to still maintaining Taiwan, because Taiwan is important for the natural resources and the economic benefit that they operate inside of that, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we don't think that even if you can get the benefit, you will be that benefit in the end of the day, and the benefit does not exist, right? But second contention, right, upon whether they can do the separation or not. Ladies and gentlemen, their main argumentation why they can do it, because first, that the people are vocal and they have the capital, and many people are condemning China. We told you that this is not exclusive, mutually exclusive only in their side of the house. We told you that Tsai Ing-wen is someone who are not pro-Beijing in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. There's still pro-people who wants democracy, there's still pro-people who wants independence, and the pro-people who would like to have independence and free movement inside of their life, ladies and gentlemen. But the status quo, the question inside of the status quo is whether or not it is strategic and worth the sacrifices that we have told you. We told you that it is not strategic because China can be that aggressive in responding towards Taiwan's stance, and it is not worth the sacrifices because the Neny's utilitarian analysis in the end of the day. But second, on the human resources, that you cannot do that. We told you, Haykal already told you that most of people who are currently inside of Taiwan is the refugees who come from China, people and refugees who come from Hong Kong's refugee who does not like China's intervention in there, ladies and gentlemen. We told you that even if they are the one who opposing China, but they are not in the capacity of for example, against China in status quo, because even in status quo they run from that country, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that they would like to cooperate in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But why in the end of the day you cannot do that, right? Because first of all, ladies and gentlemen, we told you no voice who can make you unified yet. In order for you to achieve what you want inside of status quo, you need a unification from your citizens, and I've told you why you cannot do that. But second, you do not have enough capital. You are highly independent on the mainland's economic contribution, ladies and gentlemen. But lastly, if Hong Kong is the example of your success, it's not right, because in status quo, even Hong Kong have 4 demands towards China, but it's only one demand who is fulfilled, which is the emergency that is happening right now in Hong Kong, which is extradition bill. We don't think that Taiwan coming through the status quo and saying that they would like to separate from China is the thing that is emergence and the thing that can make you win instead of status quo in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. But lastly, on Taiwan importance to maintain Tsai Ing-wen as president, current status quo, right? We told you that the context is that in January 22 they will have an election of the Taiwan's presidency, right? First, we told you that currently Tsai Ing-wen is maintaining her image. That's why she currently having a new approach inside of the political election process. In last election, she most likely engaging in politicians through politicians. But in status quo, he would like to engage more inside of the people and meeting more people, because she thinks that it is important to engage more people and to buy the voice of the swing voters. But also there are many unbenefited image framing coming from the competitors like Han Kuo-yu, for example, saying that she is childless, she does not deserve to become the president, ladies and gentlemen. This is told you that in current status quo, our hub is only Tsai Ing-wen, who is having the image of people who would like to champion the democracy in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. If she, for example, saying that we would against China, the question is that people who are still in the swing or in the gray area, who like democracy but does not know whether they should go to pro-Beijing or pro-democracy, will not be catered in her side of the house, ladies and gentlemen, because what she promised is only the sufferings, and what she promised is only the fight to China, and does not, for example, that's not promising the success of, for example, democracy and maintaining the economic benefit in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that is not strategic for this status quo to run. Thank you.